Before I start, I'll just do another reminder for everybody watching live already. If you have a question to ask Chris or Matt, just put it in the comment section with question in capitals. And look, I want to get rocking and rolling. I really appreciate both your time. And look, I'm going to start with you, Chris. Could you explain to the live audience who you are and what you specialize in the sports industry?
Thanks, Ed. Great to be here. Hello, everyone, wherever you are from around the world. My space is what we call the mass participation space. So over 35 years organizing big events like, for example, the Singapore Marathon, 60,000 participants. I used to own a business called Spectrum Worldwide, which I sold to Ironman a couple of years ago. I'm now very lucky to base myself in Bali, and we're in kind of lockdown, not quite as bad as many, still able to go and have a walk and a bike ride and get out and get a coffee occasionally. So we're very lucky down here. My other role is managing an organization which I founded called Mass Participation World. The idea of basically bringing the mass participation industry together across all verticals, marathons, triathlons, cycling events, promoting collaboration and best practice. And no better time than right now to be collaborating and sharing ideas and working together to try and find a solution. So whilst it's challenging times, it's also very exciting times, I believe.
Absolutely. Matt, could you just give a little snapshot, except being the brilliant parent, but a snapshot of your sort of career journey in the sports industry and what you specialize in, please?
My kids are bashing down the door saying you don't understand the reality. So my name's Matt Rogan. I've built a career in about 25 years in sports and entertainment space, really building and helping scale sports and entertainment businesses. But my background really is kind of the business rigor side. I'd love to have been a great sportsman, but wasn't. But I did, out of a languages degree at university, spend a lot of time understanding the mechanics and the strategy of business with a Bain McKinsey spin out. And so that's what's kept me busy, sort of trying to bring business rigor really into a passion industry.
And Chris, we're going to go straight into it. And I'm going to have to just say a massive thank you for your contribution in the mass participation industry. Like, we met, all us three, in Singapore last year, and the great work you're doing with the webinars. And the one thing I just want to highlight with today's being International Day for Sport Development and Peace, what does spirit of sport mean to you now in the world we're living, out of interest?
Look, I think it's very much what I spoke about there a few minutes ago. It's about collaboration. It's about working together. And I'm seeing it. It's amazing how, the sports industry, not just in mass, is coming together already. There was a post out on Friday where, in our industry, an absolute first, a whole bunch of big players, Running USA, Ironman, Spartan, Tough Mudder, Triathlon America, have all come together as a group to go and pitch to Congress to try and get support and funding for our industry. I myself am hosting weekly calls, which happen to be on a Monday. So shortly after this, I'm jumping on the afternoon session. I have an 8:30 a.m. session and a 4:30 p.m. my time. And this morning we had people from Auckland to Mike Nishi in Chicago, literally almost spanning the entire width of the globe. And the sharing that was happening on that call, which, a few years ago would have been people like, hey, I'm not going to share my secrets. People were saying, this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm doing. Let's help each other. And to me, that's long overdue, and one of the reasons why I founded MPW. And it's sad that we have to have a crisis to bring it, but there's going to be much positive that's going to come out of this. And I think that's the real spirit that sport brings.
Matt, how would you want to add to that with regards to the spirit of sport?
Yeah, look, I absolutely agree with that. And I think this may be the thing that means that we as a sports industry actually start to think about how we work together to get a better share of people's brains, as opposed to worrying about our own respective shares. The world of sport being its own island, and music over here and entertainment over here and commerce over here, it's just not the way people live their lives anymore. So if we, it's a great example from Chris on how collaboration, we can work together to get a bigger share of politicians' minds or health practitioners' minds, whatever it might be, all the better, really. My spirit of sport, I guess, is sport gives me a lot more than just the kind of commercial impact and paying my mortgage every month. So sport is the thing that allows me to get downtime, to focus, better, to manage my own emotions in very different environments. I went for a run this morning in Chris's honour, but just to give me some balance. And I guess that's why for me it's far more important than our industry. It goes on to the way we keep ourselves level at a challenging time like this.
And just
I'm going to call you out there. I'm going to call you out there, Matt, on a comment that you made at the beginning. I'm not such a great athlete. You might not have been a great sportsman, but you certainly blitzed the field in Singapore. And yeah.
You did.
I think you're underselling yourself, mate.
That's the benefits of 16-hour flight and caffeine. That's what.
And the hot heat. Look, with regards to today, we have a theme about skill sets and like helping people upskill themselves at home with self-education. Chris, I'm going to start with you. What is one skill set that has supported you with regards to your sports career development out of interest?
I guess maybe not quite a skill set, but this is one of the conversations we had very early on. I remember when I met you in London at the sponsorship awards, and you asked me, I think the question was, if you were giving advice to someone like me, or if you were taking a step back into the industry, what would the one piece of advice be that you would give? And it's the advice that I consistently give now. It is surround yourself with a group of advisors and mentors from the very beginning. And I was kind of young and gung-ho and kind of thought I could do it all on my own. And I was this island for a while, and I woke up to it far later in the piece. And the reality is, to be honest, that in the early days of the industry, when I was starting 35 years ago, now it's taken a lot of dye to get rid of the grey for this thing today. But it was there weren't that many people around to mentor us in that space. Albeit that in parallel industries there were probably plenty of people. But I think you've got a lot of young aspiring sports people and people that have been in the industry for a few years. You tell me on that was what you're expecting are going to be tuning in today, and it would be really surround yourself with mentors in different areas of your life as well. So it's not just in your sport, but work out what your strengths are and work out where you can be supported. I think as young people, you often feel, well, and I often have people say this to me, well, who would want to mentor me? I'm only 25, I'm 24. Who's going to have the time to mentor me? The reality is that there's lots of us senior citizens. I'm certainly not a senior citizen, but people that have been around for ages that love to give our time, that love to share our insights and support people through. And what's the worst that can happen? You go and ask someone and they say, no, I don't have the time. I think certainly that would be the one real piece of advice that I wish I'd done earlier, and I would give to any young professional in our industry now.
So just to follow up, Chris, I'll get to you, Matt, in a very short. What is that first step for somebody to get a mentor? Like, I've actually got my first mentor coming on later today, John Amici. And the one thing I was just going to, from experience, the key is how you communicate with your potential mentor. So could you just give a few tips in how people should communicate effectively online to reach out to a mentor?
Yeah, look, I think it's not necessarily always online. I mean, the first important thing is to be very clear on what it is that you want and recognize that it's not always necessarily just a one-way street. I get as much out of the people that I mentor as what I give them. I learn so much from the younger people that I mentor. So having that mindset that you've got something to offer as well. It's not necessarily just a one-way street. Being very clear on what it is that you're looking for and communicating what it is that you're looking for. And then once you've made that approach, sure, we communicate much more online these days, but trying to go through your network to get an introduction rather than, sending a cold call, so to speak. Use the network to get an introduction, have that call, and then the most important thing once you've got that is showing up authentically every time. If you make a commitment after a call, follow up on that commitment. If you haven't got something, you might set up particular, depending on how you're being mentored, it might be monthly, weekly calls. And if you haven't got something for a call, put your hand up and don't waste someone's time not coming to it prepared. I think, that is, don't waste their time by 24 hours before because you haven't got yourself organized, say you're not prepared. But if you genuinely are under control and you don't think you necessarily need to have a call that week, not suggesting that you're out of control to have a mentor, but yeah, just use the time sensibly, be honorable, be respectful, be appreciative.
Awesome. Matt, I can see you nodding your head. how would you want to follow up to that? And also, what's that one skill set, a bit different, that you've enhanced during your career journey?
So the one thing I'd add on the sort of having external support in your career development to support everything Chris is saying is, I don't work in that much in elite sport, but I do one non-exec role in elite sport. And what's really interesting there is the more elite you get, and the closer you get to the Olympics or what your gold medal looks like, the more individual support you have around, and the more coaches, the more mentors, the more people you reach out to. And the tradition in business has been that having a coach is sort of slightly remedial. There's something going wrong, and therefore I will have a coach. And what we need to do in business, and what I notice happening more in the sports industry actually is us thinking, no, actually this is a positive thing. This is how I get the extra 1, 2, 3% out of my own career and my own development, is by reaching out to people who've done it before. And I guess I do the majority of my sort of mentoring coaching back into the business that I co-founded 9 years ago, Two Circles, which has a group of very talented couple of hundred people, all of whom we try and kind of keep at the edge of their capability levels, really, in terms of always doing things every week for the first time they've ever done it. Unless you have that kind of culture, you never get anywhere. But coming on to my sort of area I was going to focus on was one of the things I'm constantly saying to the team and the people that I mentor at Two Circles is the reality is sports business is becoming more and more a right and left brain business. And so what I mean by that is it's absolutely being able to understand and quantify and understand the science behind who it is you're trying to engage with and bring with you. Which is the kind of the heavy analytic data management sort of logical side of our brains. But it's also, once you have that understanding, being creative, having empathy, having emotional intelligence, understanding how to bring a group of people with you or an audience with you through a great ad campaign or whatever it might be to drive change. And I think our education system, and I think our commerce and our university system is very attuned to say, right, I'm going to be a scientist, or I'm going to study arts. I was a linguist, and I don't think that reflects the skill sets that we need in our industry anymore. I think we need to be, people to be equally comfortable in the world of science as well as arts. So the people I'm mentoring who are looking to build 25-year careers, I'm sort of saying, well, the books I recommend they read, the podcasts I recommend they listen to, the things I recommend they focus on in their own learning are absolutely to keep, if they come from an arts background, I want them reading economics podcasts. I want them understanding how to use Excel. I want them learning how to read a balance sheet and a P&L. But if they want to come into the sports industry from PricewaterhouseCoopers, I want them standing in queues, unable to get tickets. I want them understanding how such and such you make great advertising. I want them understanding how behavior change happens and the psychology behind that. And if you look at some of the best business leaders, full stop, in the world today, or some of the best presidents, you look at Obama, who was equally comfortable in both spaces. And that's what I think the future looks like.
Just talk about change and behavior change in specific. Chris, what change would you like to see when all this is over? Not just mass participation, because I'm not going to lie, I wanted to do an ultra marathon this year, but I'll probably have to just do it around my fields if we're still allowed to run outside. But what change would you like to see in the sports industry when sport is back on the map?
I think it's a lot of the stuff that Matt talks about. It's this ongoing engagement with our constituents. It's not, we see so often in mass, it's this kind of entries have opened, bunch of marketing, thanks for running, and then we don't communicate. I think we have this amazing opportunity, and the part that I think that sport generally and mass participation particularly is missing is the health and social impact that we have the ability to make in communities, and this whole COVID opportunity to bring that to the forefront. We were on this morning's call from events in Auckland. So a government-funded body, Michael, was talking about they're starting to wake up to the fact that they've constantly measured economic impact, the likely outfall of what's going to happen here. And, you know, Matt's smiling there. We spoke about this in Singapore. We've been speaking about it for a while. You know, the simplest measure of X number of people coming into a city by X number of room nights gives an economic impact. And, you know, the example that I quote quite regularly these days, Singapore Marathon, 51,000 participants, 9,000 foreign people come in, which leaves roughly, you know, 40,000 Singaporeans that are participating in that event, that are getting more healthy, impacting their families, impacting their work colleagues, better physical health, better mental health. And sadly, I think that's going to be one of the areas that we as a sports industry really are going to have to focus on, and governments generally, the mental health issues that are going to come out of this, with, you know, businesses being lost and people being quarantined for this period of time and so on. I think sport has a massive role to play in that. So coming back to your original question, changing the narrative around how we interact with our constituents and how we communicate that we interact with them. And Matt's done amazing work on this, but I think in many spaces, you know, we still don't articulate the value proposition to the participants. So we become commoditized. So it's kind of, how dare you increase your entry fee by $5. I'm going to go down the road here because we're not working on the real value proposition that we're bringing to them. Same story with government, same story with brands. You know, there's a lot of evolution that needs to and has the opportunity to happen there. And again, to come back to your question, we, I believe, as an industry, have this massive ability to impact post COVID-19. And look, there's going to, you know, one of the real discussions we had on this morning's call, and it's got a long way to go, is what does the operational essence of an event look like after this? So, you know, by comparison, we had Boston and all these Boston bombing, and we had all these extra security layers that are going to come on. The reality is that there's now almost certainly going to be extra health and safety layers that are going to come on. And if we don't, as an industry, get on the front foot and be proactive, we're going to have councils and health agencies and so on saying, you will do this, you will do this, you will do this, in an industry which is already struggling commercially under the current business model. To have another layer of costs with that, we need to get on the front foot, and we need to say we're going to work together to go to councils with some ideas to understand what post-COVID events look like.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I also think it kind of echoes what Chris was saying earlier on. It's such an opportunity for the mass participation piece of our industry now coming out of COVID-19. A friend of Chris and mine, Craig Jews at Limelight, wrote a fabulous blog over the weekend pointing to that opportunity. And I notice it daily when I sort of go out for my run. In this neck of the woods, you're allowed to go out for one piece of exercise a day. And you look at, you know, I live in a relatively small village, but I look at the people out exercising I've never seen before. You look at what happens when you suddenly constrain demand of something, and all of a sudden people are going, actually, I've forgotten, I quite enjoy this. I quite enjoy engaging with the active world in a slightly different way. And I think what we're going to notice is every part of the sports industry is going to look different for sure. And I think that's a good thing, principally. In the mass participation space, I think we're just going to realize that the commerce of mass participation goes far beyond the entry fees and sponsorships and things. I think government are finally going to realize that every active person saves the NHS, the British health system, or wherever we are around the world, a significant amount per year. We're going to realize that actually it was that activity that we allowed people to do that actually solved a mental health epidemic in Britain that came after the medical one. So I think our understanding of what physical activity can do in education, but also in our broader society, is going to exponentially improve as a result of what we're going through, sad as it is.
I totally agree. Like, despite COVID-19, to be fair, Chris, it was your event that sparked me to do running after trying to keep up with Matt, to be honest. So despite the conditions, but look, gentlemen, we're nearly going to wrap up, but I just would love to ask one more final question for both of you. Like, in my eyes, you're two leaders in what you do with your experience and what you're currently doing now. Would you mind just sharing one tip for the audience so they can apply at home? How could they be more proactive at home in how we're living at the moment? I'm going to start with you, Chris.
Look, I think that this is an absolutely wonderful, and I've been using the term for a few weeks now. It's an opportunity for humanity to reboot, for us to connect with our friends, our family. And, I heard Matt, as we came on the call, I've got a 5-year-old who's banging on my door, and it's challenging in terms of, how do we be efficient and productive at home? What I've been lucky enough to be in many years of my life is to have what I call morning and evening rituals, and that's getting up early. In my case, it's meditating, it's journaling, it's doing my exercise. It doesn't matter what your ritual is, but having a morning ritual, and the one that most people overlook is the evening ritual, which is almost more powerful. So at the end of the day, before you go to bed, spend that 5, 10, 15 minutes, whatever it is, to refocus yourself, understand what you didn't get to. Is that journaling, whatever it may be, but to be very clear that when your feet hit the ground in the morning as you roll out of bed, you already know where you're going to be going. So morning and evening rituals are even more important in this period of time, and that might mean getting up an hour or 2 hours earlier than you're traditionally used to make sure that you get that quiet time if you are running a business or whatever it is. But yeah, that'd be my tip at the moment.
What's yours, Matt?
Yes, so I guess I would build on what I was saying earlier on around the sort of right brain, left brain piece. So it would be, to take your passions, take the ways in which you get outside of your working world at the moment, and just think about how you can maybe nudge those slightly into some areas that you don't traditionally, out of preference, spend much time on. So, at the moment, I love playing. I love music as well. I'm a very bad rhythm guitarist, but I'm sort of forcing myself against my preference to try and learn some of the notes and music theory and stuff behind that. When I record my runs that I go out for on Strava, rather than just get obsessed about the numbers, I'm trying to think about, okay, well, how I feel mentally, and whether I'm just up for it or interested or engaged or passionate about it today. How does that change the way in which I perform? Some of the books I'm reading at the moment are definitely kind of blend that left and right brain. My recommendation today would be a book called Ice Cream Social, which is about the story of Ben and Jerry's, by a guy called Brad Edmondson. And that's it's a great example of what happens when you put a lot of love into a business and no science, and then you get bought and there's a lot of science in it with no love. And actually neither are sustainable. And so I guess everything you do, you listen to, you think about, even if you try and sort of get scared a bit by the sort of extension of the COVID virus, but then you say, okay, well, let's look at some of the data behind it and the way people are representing it, some of the debate around that. Just try and take yourself into worlds where maybe your preference wouldn't necessarily be, and just understand how the future of our industry is absolutely going to be about the blend of the deeply logical and the deeply creative and empathetic.
Well, gentlemen, I know, Chris, you've got to shoot off and do a webinar. Out of interest, how can people interact with you? And firstly, this conversation has been fantastic. But Chris, how can people interact with you online?
Thanks, Ed. Before I finish, thank you. Congratulations. Really great initiative, this. And on board. Yeah, really awesome. And then so great to get to share the screen rather than the stage with Matt as well. It's wonderful. Yeah, so for me, LinkedIn, Chris Robb, Facebook, Chris Robb Asia, and my email, if you want to contact me directly, chris@chrisrobb.asia. And yeah, feel free. I'm happy to help whoever I can. Awesome.
Matt, how can people interact with you online?
So I'm fairly straightforward. The best way probably to get hold of me is just an email address is matt@mattrogansport.com. Twitter's Matt Rogan Sport, Instagram's Matt Rogan Sport. I haven't really worked anything else out, but you can find me on LinkedIn as well.
That is great. To everybody watching live, there will be links to where you can connect. I would recommend following Matt. He's been doing awesome content with his family. Don't know if you've seen Chris, but he did a good little cricket video with the family. It was fantastic. And look, before I forget, everybody's watching live, please comment below your biggest learning lesson. And I can actually say this now to Chris and to Matt. It took a bit of time to get this going, but we've actually got a social impact partner, Common Goal, who are involved in this summer event. And below everybody, you can make a donation at education2sport.com impact. And it's all going 100% to COVID-19. So, gentlemen, thank you so much. And look, keep up the great work you're doing, and thank you again for today.
Top job, mate. Cheers, Chris.
Yeah, well, mate. Good luck. Cheers, Matt. Good luck for the rest of the day, mate.